Watch this.
All right, day 3 of the Von Ellinger rape trial, which wasn't exactly a full day. Prosecution rested yesterday. Today, the defense called its one and only witness, Von Ellinger himself. And by early afternoon, the jury was given the task of determining his guilt. Former state representative Aaron Von Ellinger is accused of raping a 19-year-old who was working as an intern at the State House during the 2021 legislative session. The agreed upon facts: Von Ellinger and Jane Doe went to dinner on March 9th, 2021. They then went back to his apartment that evening. What happened after that is what is in question, consensual or not. So we are still waiting for a verdict from that jury. And Joe Paris joins us now. Spent the morning monitoring this trial. Joe, any surprise that Von Ellinger did take the stand in his defense, considering I don't know that he had to?
No, and Von Ellinger, to be clear, did not have to take the stand this morning. He could have pleaded the Fifth Amendment and they could have moved on with the entire thing. So there was some conversations early this morning in court about if Von Ellinger was going to testify. Going into today, it wasn't clear whether he would or not. His defense team had presented a line of evidence saying that, you know, the prosecution has not shown that this happened. The prosecution has not proved this. So you could argue, Brian, that they really did not need Mr. Von Ellinger to testify today, but they chose to, and that may end up benefiting them. He gets to get his side of the facts into the record. Again, yesterday, Jane Doe did testify, but because she did leave during testimony and there was no time for cross-examination by the defense, her comments and whatever happened in court yesterday involving her is all thrown out. So the jury is not able to consider that. Long story short, though, we heard a real summary today from the prosecution and the defense. Very different stories. Prosecution saying that this was a violent sexual act. This was a rape. The defense saying, meanwhile, that this was a consensual night with 2 consenting adults. With all the facts in the case that we've touched on over the last 2 days, that's now been given to the jury. And as we speak right now at 5 o'clock on Thursday, they are being trusted to make a final decision. We will see what comes back, Brian. I know that there's concerns for those that are looking for the prosecution that they may not have enough evidence, and that might be something that the defense is really pushing at. Really, during closing statements, that's what they told the jury from the defense side, that the evidence is not there. You cannot convict this man.
All right, so beyond what happened today, Joe, they say that sexual assault victims are victimized, or survivors, I should say. Sexual assault survivors are victimized twice. The second time when they do have to face their accusers or recount their trauma in a courtroom. And so that's kind of what your focus is a little bit today. Yeah, and we watched Jane Doe testify at the State House during the House Ethics Committee hearing. And during that setting, you may remember, she was testifying behind a black curtain and just speaking to her defense team. So it was a much different situation than what we saw yesterday with Jane Doe testifying in open court and being able to look in the eye of the person she's accusing of a very serious thing. It keeps in mind, though, as we're watching everything unfold yesterday, that there could be victims, or unfortunately future victims, that watch what happened with Jane Doe getting up during defense and leaving, and they might think to themselves, well, I would never want to go through that myself, and I don't know if I would ever want to go through with getting help, because we saw the way that Jane Doe has been treated and the way that really she had to go through this whole process. So today we spoke with Faces of Hope in Boise. They're a victim advocacy center in Boise, and we wanted to talk to them kind of about the support that they have for victims and survivors, and also kind of the conversation about how difficult it is for survivors to talk in open court. Here's what they had to say.
At Faces, we provide wraparound services at no cost to our victims, and we serve people who have been dealing with domestic violence, sexual assault, elder abuse, child abuse, sex trafficking, and stalking. And so through One Door, we have partners in the facility, but we also have our team members that are going to help you get all of the services, access all of the services that you need. So we're going to take care of your emotional, medical, legal, basic needs, educational needs, all of that. So you don't have to navigate it through the community. It's right here and under one roof.
I know, fortunately for people when they come in here, usually they have never dealt with something like this. It's terrible trauma that they're dealing with, but a lot of people had never gone through it before. When you work with those types of people who feel shy or feel embarrassed to be here, what type of message do you have for them?
Oh gosh, the first thing we want everybody to feel is that they are believed, because a lot of times this is maybe a secret that they've kept, or they've told somebody, and maybe the first question is, well, why didn't you just leave? Relationships are complicated, life is complicated, and so when somebody's coming to Faces, they're scared, they're not sure, who they can trust. They've been looking over their shoulder to make sure that they're not being followed. So to be able to come, hearing the click of our door, knowing that you're safe and knowing that there's partners here that can help you, that gives people a lot of hope, which is I think why we're appropriately named, because when people come here, they can take a deep breath and know that they're safe.
Notably in the news this week, we see the situation with Jane Doe down at the Ada County Courthouse, and we saw the traumatic events that she's gone through just being asked to retell her story in court. And I can imagine if I was a victim at home, I'd say to myself, I never want to go through what Jane Doe is going through. I might never want to speak up because I see, the consequences. To victims at home that may see the coverage of Jane Doe in the news and say, I don't want to go down that path, I don't want to bring it up, what advice would you have to them?
Oh, goodness. First off, it takes a lot of courage to come and speak out about your abuse. So here at Faces, I think the beauty is, number one, we're going to make sure that emotionally and mentally we're supporting you and we're believing you. So we've got crisis counselors. When you're ready to talk about it, we've got the emotional support by our counselors who are trauma trained. Every story is unique, so you're coming to Faces and you're scared, and your story is going to be different from everybody else's. However, trauma looks very similar with the victims that come to Faces. So the first thing I would say is, if you're coming to Faces, you're going to be believed, you're going to get the support that you need. Most of the time when people come to Faces, they'll say, oh my goodness, I wish that I'd known about this place earlier. We have people who have been dealing with trauma, with some sort of abuse for years because they were so scared to come and ask for help. I think we all go into relationships, we all go into things thinking, this is love, this is going to be great, but happily ever after is a lot more in the fairy tales than we like to think. And so when you have to come to Faces and admit that you're dealing with abuse, it's hard. And so to have people come and give you complete support, that's really important here at Faces. And the people who are here are trained and they want to just help. And we're not going to make you do anything that you're not ready for. We want to make sure that you have the control that maybe you've been missing in the abuse that you've been dealing with, and so you can call the shots.
Jane Doe left the stand in the middle of testimony this week saying, quote, I can't do this, highlighting how difficult and traumatizing recounting an event is. Dinger says she thinks the legal system has made progress in handling traumatic accounts, but there is still plenty of work to do.
I think we're coming a long way. I think that being trauma-informed is something that our law enforcement is looking into, and they want training. Our attorneys, our prosecutors are wanting the training to be more trauma-informed. It's no longer okay to say, buck up, it's okay, just get through this. We want justice for, offenders, but we also need to make sure that when our victims are coming to testify or whatever they're doing, that they are feeling safe and believed. I think we have a long way to go, but I do feel like the court system, they know that they need to make improvement, but I think they're working on that.
And an important note from the Faces Center, they tell us that all of their services are free. They're not worried about billing medical insurance or worrying about getting payment. They're there to help people in need. And Brian, it's just a great reminder that for people that do go through these traumatic events, there's nothing that can undo those. But there are resources and people in our community that want to help you out of the goodness of their heart.
You touched on this a little bit, the distinction between when she testified in Von Ehlinger's ethics hearing. She was behind a curtain. Set aside from the rest of the people, didn't have to look at anybody.
Right.
Court of law is a little bit different. I know that they want the jury to see people on the stand, see their faces, see their reaction to questions, that kind of stuff. You'd have to think, though, with sexual assault victims, if we've learned anything during this pandemic, lots of things are possible through Zoom, through cameras, whatever, that there's got to be some sort of advancement to at least, go somewhere in the middle of that.
Well, I really think what happened over the last 18 months with the situation with Jane Doe highlights that there might need to be changes made. So it'd be interesting to see if anything is brought up maybe at the legislature or brought up in the justice community about ways to address these problems.
Yeah. All right, Joe. Well, again, waiting for a verdict from the jury who has had it for about, how many hours, 4 hours right now?
3 or 4 hours,
3 or 4 hours, and we'll see if that comes through today. If not, it may be coming through for tomorrow. Thanks, Joe. Critical race theory has been a touchstone for more than a year now. With little to no evidence, it's being taught in Idaho schools. So why are we touching on it again? Well, because for some reason, some people can't let it go. If you have something to say, you can always say it here. 208-321-5614. That's how you can be part of the 208 conversation. Send us a text message. We like them clever, we like them concise, and of course, we like them clean about anything we've talked about here on the show. Or maybe something you'd like us to talk about. Don't forget to include your name and the hashtag the 208. We could share yours at the end of today's show. There was an interesting part of Tuesday's debate for State Superintendent of Public Instruction that caught a lot of people's attention, mostly because it's been the center of attention for roughly 2 years when it comes to education. Critical race theory permeating Idaho's public schools. Two of the candidates, current Superintendent Sherry Ibarra and former president of the State Board of Education, Debbie Critchfield, said, despite parents' concerns, it's not. The third candidate, former state legislator Brandon Durst, said it is. And when asked for specific examples, he offered this.
The first is the Portrait of the Graduate program that they have in the Coeur d'Alene School District. It's a version of critical race theory of social justice indoctrination that they're being pushed system-wide in the Coeur d'Alene schools.
System-wide in Coeur d'Alene schools, Durst said. And we've talked about this several times. These accusations of social justice indoctrination in schools, critical race theory, unknowingly, insidiously being taught to our children, from college kids to as young as preschoolers. And when we look into it, every school district, teacher, administrator, they tell us it's just not the case. These accusers are at worst conflict entrepreneurs, and at least ill-informed. But Durst hasn't been the only one accusing schools in Coeur d'Alene of pushing CRT. Last fall, there was an election for the Coeur d'Alene School Board. Leslie Bjerke was one of the candidates for Zone 4, and she won by just 23 votes. But during the campaign, she participated in a Zoom Q&A back in October, and she said this about Portrait of a Graduate in Coeur d'Alene schools.
So as I went through Portrait of a Graduate, the word equity is a constant. I mean, that word has been used all over the place. That is definitely within critical race theory. So you may not be teaching the actual theory, but you actually have components in it. And these components are being woven in through every aspect of your child's curriculum at this point. We've moved away from strong academics more to emotions. And while I understand teaching very young children that emotions are something that comes up organically throughout the day, we never used to carve out special time to teach a child how to identify the colors of their emotion or how many emotions they felt during the day. These are all under the umbrella of critical race theory.
You know, we never used to carve out part of the day for active shooter drills either, but here we are. And I digress. Emotions are under the umbrella of CRT. That might be the loosest definition of a postgraduate academic concept, legal analysis that is usually reserved for students of law. Emotions? And that's where most of these claims lose their credibility with all these loose definitions of critical race theory. So by the way, we reached out to Brandon Durst and to Bjerke there to get their take on what specifically they were talking about when it comes to Portrait of a Candidate in Coeur d'Alene. We have yet to hear back. But how about how candidate Durst defined CRT Tuesday night?
It's a Marxist theology or theory that says we place people into two groups. And instead of using economic terms for those groups, we use racial groups. One group has been oppressed and the other group is doing the oppressing. And those that have been doing the oppressing should feel shame for what they have done. They should feel shame for their heritage. That's wrong.
That is wrong. That it's happening, or your definition of it, or both. Because critical race theory, which has been around for 4 decades, at its core says racism is not just an individual bias or prejudice, but it's embedded in legal systems and policies. This from the American Bar Association. CRT is not diversity or inclusion training, but a practice of looking critically at the role of race and racism in society and questioning it. They quoted the legal scholar who coined the term critical race theory, that'd be Kimberly Crenshaw, who said CRT is not a noun, but a verb. And while it is evolving and malleable, it critiques how the social construction of race and institutionalized racism perpetrate a racial caste system that relegates people of color to the bottom tiers. It also includes other identities like sexuality and gender identity. CRT also recognizes racism as not an old concept, a relic of the past. It analyzes how the legacy of slavery, segregation, and the imposition of second-class citizenship based on race continues to be a thing in this country. Again, that's from the American Bar Association. And you don't have to go too far back to see it. Jim Crow laws, redlining of neighborhoods, white-only property deeds here in Idaho, criminal justice policies of the 1990s. Or how about how difficult it is today to build affordable housing in a majority white advantaged neighborhood? But back to what Brandon Durst said about the Coeur d'Alene School District, how CRT is being pushed system-wide. Well, we brought that quote to the school district today and asked Katie Grotman, the district's director of curriculum, about CRT in CDA schools.
One group has been oppressed, and the other group is doing the oppressing. And those that have been doing the oppressing should feel shame for what they have done. They should feel shame for their heritage.
I've listened to Mr. Durst's definition of CRT, which he talked about as one group making one group feel like they are oppressed and another group feel like they are an oppressor, or dividing people by race. And that is not at all what we do in the Coeur d'Alene School District.
The first is the Portrait of the Graduate program that they have in the Coeur d'Alene School District. It's a version of critical race theory of social justice indoctrination that they're being pushed system-wide in the Coeur d'Alene schools.
That quote from Brandon, what do you think of that?
I just think that Brandon doesn't really know what our Portrait of a Graduate is or does. It's not a program. What it is it's a portrait or a picture that has been created by our community about what we want our graduates, our students to look like and be like when they leave us. And we engaged in months of dialogue with our community, with civic stakeholders, with business owners, and we just simply asked them, what is it that you want our graduates to be like and be able to do when they leave our system? And it boiled down to 6 main things.
They came up with this wheel of skills, 6 C's they called it: critical thinking, collaboration, character, content knowledge, communication, and creativity.
You know, there are a lot of challenges that they'll be encountering in the world, and they need to be able to be creative and problem solving around them. As we think about what we bring into our district or how we set things up for our students, we consider those 6 criteria. And it's puzzling to me to understand how that is tied in any way to critical race theory.
There's also this idea that maybe it's not technically CRT, but it is social emotional learning, this SEL, the other acronym that people like to throw around. Is social emotional learning a bad thing in schools?
So when we talk about social emotional learning, what we're talking about is helping kids learn how to share, to learn how to disagree without attacking each other, to learn how to apologize when they make a mistake and accidentally hurt a peer, and to learn how to work together and have their needs met in ways that are healthy and productive as part of living in a classroom community.
The district had been working on their Portrait of a Graduate for 3 years, and in February of 2020, they were thrilled to introduce it.
I think we'd be excited to do that. It's just to see how far it's come along the way and their input and the feedback that we've gotten. You know, it's almost not a secret anymore, right? So many people have given us feedback on this. To finally be to this point is like, well, people are saying, well, aren't you guys done with that? But we've been working on each and every iteration to make sure we capture the voice of as many as we could.
This isn't just like, here's a program, follow it. It was developed by all kinds of people in your community.
Exactly. Yes. Over multiple listening sessions, over multiple opportunities to interact with various stakeholders in our community, parents, civic partners, businesses, making sure that we are listening because we value very much what our community wants and says about education.
Why then do you think that there's this big pushback after taking so many years to develop this with the community's help? Now all of a sudden it's a problem.
I think that there might have been people who were not engaged in the process, who don't understand necessarily how this came to be. And so it's part of my job just to help people understand that and that this isn't some sort of outside product that is being pushed on our community. Rather, it's our community responding to what they want, and it's us responding to our community's goals.
Again, we did reach out to candidate Durst and trustee Bjerke to ask what about Coeur d'Alene's Portrait of a Graduate specifically they see as CRT, other than the word equity. We have not yet heard back. So Portrait of a Graduate is a national program created by a company in Ohio called Battelle for Kids, at whose core values are diversity, equity, and inclusion. How those are applied are completely up to each local school community. And there are unique portraits of a graduate all over the country. Katie told us while they used Patel to get started, it was simply that, a starting point for starting a conversation with the Coeur d'Alene community. The outcome was not predetermined at all, she said. It took 3 years after all. You may be wondering, after all this time, why are we still talking about this? Well, because these accusations keep coming up by people who would like you to give them permission and the power to make decisions for you and your kids. And it's our job to look into these things, because if what they're telling us is true, it sounds pretty scary. But consistently, when we bring these claims to the source, to the actual people who are charged and given the responsibility to educate your kids, they tell us and they show us it's not true. And you can find out for yourself, not through us, not through a website or talk radio or social media. All the school districts in Idaho are literally and figuratively open books when it comes to curriculum. Curriculum that is collaborated by each local community. Hard to find words for this picture here. Maybe So Idaho would be fitting then, right? Maybe, I don't know. Are they moving in or are they moving out? Because they're taking everything, including the toilets, and apparently, if you look closely, the dirt, the yard, is on top of that couch there. This pic was taken at the intersection of Coeur and Overland Roads in Boise, and again, just another sign that Idahoans, yep, we do things our own way.